Penn State is targeting 3 ACC head coaches. All of them are prime candidates in this head coaching search, but one of them stands out well above the rest.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It's another epic crossover event. Alex Donno and Kenton Gibbs from Locked On ACC. We got Zach Seyko from Locked On Nittany Lions, and there's no time like the present with James Franklin being linked to the Virginia Tech job and multiple current ACC coaches being linked as candidates to Penn State. Thank you so much to the everydayers on both of our channels and all of our channels. Kenton also hosts Locked On Wolfpack. Big win for the Pack. I also host Locked On Canes. Tough loss for the Canes. This episode is proudly brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So we'll talk about possible ACC coaches to Penn State. First, Zach Seyko, want to pick your brain on this. I keep seeing Jeff Brohm, current head coach at Louisville. I've seen him atop the betting odds on certain occasions as a possible next head coach for Penn State. I've seen Brent Key, who's doing a great job despite the fact he just took an L to the Fighting Kenton Gibbs over the weekend. I see Brent Key showing up on that hot board as well. Do you like either of them as a possible next head coach at Penn State, and why?
Tons. And the preference is Jeff Brohm because he's been within the Big Ten. He was, the reason he landed Louisville, aside from we're talking deep connections. I spoke to somebody today about why they don't think Jeff Brohm is a realistic candidate for Penn State, because I had no idea how deep the connections were for him at that. So that's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Never say never. People have left their alma mater before for head coaching positions elsewhere, but I'm just saying that if Penn State is going to make it difficult for Jeff Brohm to say no, let's just put it that way, if they believe that he is a true candidate. But it's being reported that, we want to talk about tangible and not just speculation. The tangible is being reported by 24/7 that Brent Key during the bye week here, so he goes and loses to the Fighting Kenton Gibbs, and then on his week off, he's set to have an in-person interview with Pat Kraft, the athletic director for the Penn State job. There's no wrong answer here when it comes to Penn State and who they're targeting. And because you're going to go in the correct direction if you get Jeff Brohm. I've always said that in this coaching search, Penn State needs, and we could talk about Manny Diaz, right? He's at Duke in this conversation. He's still going to be linked to this job and be one of the contenders all the way through. But speaking on Brohm, you need somebody different than what James Franklin has given Penn State for a decade plus here. And look no further than the results themselves. Okay, well, what about recruiting? What about his connections and things like that? Okay, but how about somebody that's just winning the big games? Somebody that is 4-4 against top 25 teams. He wasn't doing that at Western Kentucky, but he picked up 3 top 5 wins at Purdue, and go figure, has a more recent victory over the Ohio State Buckeyes than James Franklin does. And then he adds to it. He defeats on a Friday night the number 2 Miami Hurricanes. And you can make the argument, sent that team in a downward spiral because of that game. So Jeff Brohm, just in-game coaching, not being afraid of the moment. I'm not here to say that James Franklin was afraid, but he doesn't shy away from it. I think he embraces it. So if you want something different, how about going after the guy that actually does the thing that James Franklin never could, winning the big game?
Yeah. So tell me this. Brohm is your number 1 guy. Okay. Number
out of
2,
the ACC.
Out of the ACC. Oh, who's your number 1 guy overall? Who's your number 1 guy overall if it ain't Brohm?
If logistics aside, Mike Elko, Texas A&M. Logistics aside. Perfect.
Oh, you angered Kenton.
The number 1 woman I want on Hinge to match with me is Megan Thee Stallion. We got to be realistic with ourselves, Zach. We got to be realistic with ourselves. She's dating Klay Thompson. He's 6'7" and $100 millionaire. I can't pull that. I can't do that. Okay.
I think you
could. Half the battle.
So when we see Elko running out of the tunnel at Happy Valley next year, we'll believe that believers half the battle. All right. Of the people.
Hold on, let me ask you this real quick. Were you relieved to see Matt Rule sign an extension with Nebraska? Because I'm not a Matt Rule believer. I think you dodged a bullet there.
Yes, because it just goes back to what I said. You want to get something different. Matt Rule is no different. I mean,
Nope.
you could even make the argument that he's worse in
Yeah.
big games. Oh, but it was at Baylor, it was at Temple. What is he 0-8 now against top 25 teams at Nebraska? At least you have some leverage at Nebraska, even though they're in the lower tier of the Big Ten. At least one? No, zero.
By the way, there was this great X post. I can't remember which crap talker posted it, but they said that Matt Rule is the James Franklin of Mario Cristobal's, is what the post was. Like the greatest thing I've ever seen.
That's poetry.
It is.
Oh,
it was in haiku form, I think.
Shakespearean.
So of the guys that are on the betting odds favorites, right? Of the guys that we know, like, hey, this is a serious chance that Penn State has to land them. I feel like Brohm is your number one of those guys. And if not, who is? And who are your 2 and 3 of that list? And are they both ACC coaches? Or are you looking elsewhere?
I mean, I like Brent Key a ton. So if I had to go, okay, well, it's impossible to hire Mike Elko. Let's bring the logistics and the being realistic, actually.
Right.
Same thing with Kalen DeBoer. I'm thinking 1A, 1B, logistics aside, you target Mike Elko, you make a phone call. And Kurt Signetti, you make the phone call. Okay. Yeah. Well, I haven't seen any extension signed by Elko and DeBoer as it is right now. That's all I'm saying. Look how quickly Indiana reacted. They got an extension mid-season. Texas A&M, they keep winning. Alabama keeps winning. They're right in the thick of the playoff race. Then where are their extensions? Just putting that out there until there's a signature somewhere. But Jeff Brohm would be the number one candidate in terms of, hey, this is realistic, but it's still somewhat of a long shot because of the Louisville connection. Same thing with Brent Key over at Georgia Tech and the postseason. How long does Penn State want to wait? How long should they? How long can they wait to where it starts to actually hurt them? And then they made the wrong decision firing James Franklin in the middle of the season, and it comes back to bite them because they actually created leverage by being the first the top tier program, right? Okay, Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech, but Penn State stands out above the rest. And now LSU, Florida, and Auburn joined the party. Even UCLA, right? That still doesn't compare. They're all in this category by themselves, but now there's a lot of top 10, top 15 programs that are all vying for the same head coaching candidates. So you got to make a move somewhat quickly, but I think Penn State feels like it holds the cards. Now we see the rumors now. Penn State told Urban Meyer no, potentially. That Penn State is basically telling people knowing that they are kind of dictating the terms of this head coaching search. With all that being said, if they don't get an established head coach, Brian Hartline would be offensive coordinator of Ohio State. You see how it's worked with Dan Lanning. You see how it's worked with Marcus Freeman, Kirby Smart. They're not the standard. They're the exception. I get it. However, I'd like to think that Brian Hartline, again, would bring elements that are different to James Franklin, player development, connections, the
recruiting.
Absolutely. And James Franklin's a great recruiter, but it's a different, it's the player development along with the recruiting. And Penn State, I'm so sick of them having middle of the road QBs and wide receivers that Brian Hartline would fix that overnight.
Oh, your wide receiver problem would be fixed in the snap of a finger if you get Brian. He's taken enough guys out of South Florida that I know. Yeah. I know how that goes. I know how that
playing
goes
with the
him.
Dolphins. That's why.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, the Game Time app is the only ticket app that Kenton, Zach, and I use when we're looking for college football tickets. I couldn't be more excited about the rest of this season. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself, with endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. But that's why we use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It is the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. That's what I love about Game Time. What else I love is the panoramic views you can get right there in the app from your seat before you buy. You know exactly what you're going to be looking at. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, LOCKEDONCollege, for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go! Download the Game Time app today. Zach, Seyko, want to pick your brain on this. Heavy links over the past week or so to James Franklin possibly landing at the vacancy at Virginia Tech, which I think catches a lot of people by surprise because Virginia Tech would probably have to pay more for James Franklin than they've ever paid for a football coach before. I would argue, and I think Kenton has said the same thing, that coming off a high-pressure job like Penn State, going to a place like Virginia Tech where there's not the same sort of pressure cooker might actually be a really good fit for him right now.
And that's perfectly well said. I agree with you 100%. But is that how James Franklin feels? Is James Franklin using the Virginia Tech job as a safety net because he knows that it might actually benefit him to stay in college football and not take the year off, go the media analyst route for a season or two, which I think could do could do James Franklin some good, but he also kind of has to reestablish his credibility. But does James Franklin fully believe that for himself? As Florida is still open, LSU, which is, obviously going to be the case, but as Florida is open, LSU, now Auburn, this conversation continues to take twists and turns. And if those jobs weren't available, slam dunk Virginia Tech. I have a hard time, but it's kind of I have to believe it to see it kind of thing, because I know how James Franklin is, and I'm not trying to demean him. I know how Jimmy Sexton, his agent, is. And
that's the big one right there.
It has to do with a lot of the fact that Franklin believes that he's better than Virginia Tech. Is this a move that Franklin believes is best for him for the next 5, 10, 15 years? It's also kind of odd that Virginia Tech hires one Penn State coach, fires him, and then brings in the next Penn State coach behind him, Brent Key being the former Penn State defensive coordinator. It's just hard for me to materialize how going from a team within the Big Ten with all the resources, all the support that Penn State gave to Franklin, and then taking a significant step back in terms of the leverage that you have and being in the ACC, I just have a hard time buying that Franklin is okay with that, which is why he's using Virginia Tech probably as a safety net and being advised so by his agent, Jimmy Sexton, to either get as many guarantees as logistically possible from BT or waiting until Auburn, Florida, LSU isn't calling. I've heard that from our counterpart over at Locked On LSU with Matt Moscona, that LSU has not mentioned the words James Franklin in a sentence by anybody. So Auburn, though, could have legit interest, and I think that's what Franklin and his agent are waiting for.
Well, I want to push back against the idea that, James Franklin looks at this job as beneath him, and especially Jimmy Sexton. If he's looking out for his candidates or his representative or the coaches he represents in a meaningful way, James Franklin is an East Coast guy. It takes a certain personality, a certain type of guy to not only succeed, but to stay around at a place like Auburn. And I'm not sure James Franklin is that type of guy. However, James Franklin has proven he's one of the best at recruiting the Eastern Seaboard, especially when you're talking about that D.C., Maryland, Virginia, the DMV area and above, right? When you talk about the DMV and above, that is his sweet spot. That's where he makes his hay as a recruiter. So I think that if we're saying, hey, go into the toughest conference, go in with potentially less resources than the teams you're playing against, and go into a region that, with all due respect, he looked good at Vanderbilt while he was there, but Vanderbilt was not a Southeastern recruiting powerhouse when he was there. There was much more of a national deal in it. We're selling you on education. We're selling you on all the good things you can have here, as opposed to come play near home. You're from here, play here, win ball games here. So I think that there is a lot of legitimacy to the Virginia Tech angle in that regard. But let me ask you this, from the other regard of location, right? Do you think that it's a great fit going from Happy Valley to a place like Blacksburg, being that these are two very unique, very rural places that, you're very far removed from your nearest major city and all that, and that environment is kind of a bubble. Do you think that that's a good fit for James Franklin, or is that being overstated by people saying it's a great transition to go from Happy Valley to Blacksburg?
He knows that all too well. He knows how to maximize, at least to the best of his ability, because I know the recruiting limitations of State College, Pennsylvania. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that, that's a destination for tons of college athletes. It's not. It takes it is a niche location. But Virginia Tech, kind of a similar situation where I'm not here to compare State College versus Blacksburg, but it's another similar setup where it's not Miami, right? It's not LA. And that's a really extensive comparison, right? That's even further from what we're talking about here. My point being is that it's not just easy to say, hey, location, location, location. And James Franklin is used to that. So him being at Virginia Tech, I think the schools in the ACC should be concerned about that above all else. To say that, oh, well, Penn State should be worried. He's right in the East Coast. He still has the connections. In the short term, yes, because he could poach players in the transfer portal because he has relationships built. I fully expect players that they think that they can start at a school like Virginia Tech. Remember, this is ACC versus the Big Ten, okay? Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to come on, do a crossover with your guys, the show devoted literally to the conference itself.
But don't worry, we criticize the ACC enough here on Locked On ACC, so you're all good, brother. Don't worry about what you say.
But that's just it, is that Penn State will have to worry about its own issues with Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, and other powers in the SEC that try to move up into the Northeast, whereas Franklin, that's a concern for Maryland. That's a concern for schools like North Carolina, Virginia, who's obviously seeing ample success. For James Franklin to drop down into Virginia Tech like that, I think he could get VT at the top of the ACC, but my expectation is that he's using it as a springboard in the next 3 to 4 years to get back within the Big Ten or the SEC.
All right, so let me ask you then, as we close the book on Franklin before we move on to everything else, your prediction as to where he's going to end up, whether it is out of coaching altogether, maybe for a year sabbatical on TV like so many coaches do, or if he does land at a program, which program do you think is the best fit in his mind?
In his mind, I would look at a school. Here's one that's just not being discussed as much because I don't know what direction they're going to go in. I think Michigan State would be phenomenal for him, actually. I think the Wolverine, the Auburn makes a ton of sense. I've always said that Florida would be a job to watch in the past, before any of this happened. I'm talking 5 years ago when there was steam that he was going to go to USC. It was USC, LSU, and Florida were always the schools that I viewed as jobs. Back in 2018 and 2019, they could poach James Franklin from Penn State when times were extremely different before NIL, transfer portal, and all of that. Florida makes sense to me. LSU, since they're not even saying his name over there, I'm not going to consider them. Auburn has genuine interest. He's showing up on hot boards. I know that John Summerall is the leading candidate, but I think under the circumstances now, Michigan State could use somebody that could stabilize, and recruiting in the Michigan area, which he's actually had success with. The Wolverines need some resistance. They need somebody to go up and compete with them in recruiting. That's why Michigan is as good as they are now, because they don't have anybody pushing back on them in the local areas, because Michigan State isn't a threat anymore. That's when Jim Harbaugh had his biggest struggles, because Michigan State was actually doing well as a program. I thought UCLA would be a good fit, because if USC really liked him, well, UCLA is not that far from USC in proximity. But Michigan State, I think, is the best situation for him. UCLA, I think, would be a good situation for him. Virginia Tech, for right now, is an ideal setup for him. But is James Franklin willing to accept that himself?
KG, I'll give you the final word on that.
Well, I to say that Michigan State would be a better job than Virginia Tech, I don't give a damn about conferences, Seyko. You're tripping. You're tripping. Yeah, what's going on here? Your perennial little brother to a school that is not just a regional powerhouse. Michigan is a national brand. That's one of those, like, you're always going to be little brother situation, as opposed to Virginia Tech, where even when Virginia's having immense success, people still look at them like, can you beat Virginia Tech at the end of the year? And even beyond that, the UCLA, USC thing, I could see that being more of a thing. But let's not sell Virginia Tech short here. But let me end it with this. Let me ask you this one question before we go to break here. If we're talking about James Franklin in the next 5 to 10 years, where do you think this trajectory goes? Is he going upward from here and this was just a bad year? Or do you think this is the beginning of a long decline?
I think he reestablished his credibility. If he ends up at a place like Virginia Tech, he'll win, and he'll win pretty quickly because he has connections. Again, he'll bring with him elements that were at Penn State. What is someone like Anthony Poindexter thinking? Would he follow James Franklin? And then that's a home run coaching hire that just gets somebody that can recruit very well. So Virginia Tech would start to swing and punch above its weight class, which would be bad for the ACC. And then that it reestablishes James Franklin's credibility as a recruiter, as a program builder, and then somebody that's just in flux. Every 3 years, they're Auburn firing a coach, Florida, every few cycles, they fire somebody. Let's get James Franklin to see if that's the answer. So when James Franklin promises national titles, I don't think he's winning a national title anytime soon, if ever, at any program. But he will be able to reestablish what he does well and then get back to doing what he does best, and that's winning consistently, but your ceiling is capped.
Right. That's well said. And on the Virginia Tech side, we've heard about the Hokies willing to invest massive amounts of money into their football and athletics budget. So they really do want to kind of return to that old standard. The game has changed a lot since Frank Beamer was there winning and getting close to a national championship back in the late 90s, but they would like to raise their standard, and James Franklin would be a great guy to help them do it. When we come back, I want to break down where this opening at Penn State ranks among all these big jobs available. You know, where the Virginia Tech job ranks. Obviously, they're going to be behind a few of these behemoths that are now open, but you want to keep it locked right here. Locked On Nittany Lions, Locked On ACC crossover right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Guys, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on that action than right now than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving customers $300 in bonus bets. New customers, $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Penn State, for me, it's definitely it's obviously a top 4 job, maybe a top 3 job. Normally, Kenton, I would have, and I have in the recent past, ranked at the LSU job number 1. But then it's like there's all this political stuff that I don't fully understand going on with the governor getting the AD fired. It's like, I don't know if that makes the Penn State job or the LSU job, I should say, a little bit diminished. The Auburn job is now open, but they certainly have not shown long-term commitments to head coach. They cycle through guys every few years. Same thing with Florida, but those are massive jobs. Like, at least, Penn State has shown commitment to the coaches that they've had. They stuck with James Franklin for a really long time. That may make the job, top 2 caliber. Kenton, I'll go to you first. Where do you rank Penn State, and how do you rank the openings right now?
I'd still say it's got to be number 3 or 4, depending on what else pops open. Only because LSU is, I don't care what they got going on politically. I don't care what type of I don't want to lose our clean rating, but what type of buffoon, rather, the governor looks like at times. Realistically, when you look at all these openings and say who has won the most recent national championship, what is a state that does not have any serious competition around them? Yeah. Ole Miss is the only school that you're looking at that's a bordering school that you're like, that is a serious school at all times. And maybe you would go Alabama as well, but that's it. That's all. That's it.
Like in-state Louisiana, which is one of the best recruiting states in the country, they have no competition in state. None. None.
They are the standard. They are what Ohio State is to the state of Ohio. It's just nobody's close. Yeah. So I'd say LSU has to be number 1, even though Florida continues to cycle through coaches. You want to talk about a hotbed of talent, Donno? Yeah, you got to fight. Don't get me wrong. You got to fight. You got to battle. You got to scrap to keep those.
And even if you only win like 20% of the battles in state, you're still getting great players down here.
A great recruiting class. So I'd say that they're number 2. And we got to talk about it because we know it's going to be open. Florida State. I might say Florida State is number 2 and Florida's number 3, actually, because Florida State, you talk about commitment to a coach. You talk about all of the resources, and you talk about the way that Zach talked about the ACC, anybody can come in and win. Anyone. So Florida State,
for them, I think the Florida job is better than the Florida State job right now because Florida State is in more debt. And this is only if they fire Norvell, obviously, but they just spent hundreds of millions on stadium renovations, the ACC lawsuit, and if they also fire Mike Norvell, which is going to cost close to $60 million, Florida's buyout for Napier was a fraction of that.
Well, Donno, the reason I say that is because booster money is a lot like NFL salary cap, and everybody's the Saints. It doesn't really exist. Like the number's kind of there, but we're always like, wait, how the heck? What's going on? And all of a sudden, more money appears. So I think Florida State is a fantastic job because they have the resources, they have the success, they can pitch to kids. Dude, we won an ACC championship 3 years ago. Yeah, that like this ain't you got to go back in foreverdom to figure out when we were the class of the conference. Not to mention, we are in prime position to once again be the class of the conference very quickly because our competitors down there in Coral Gables, every November, no-win November is very real for them. I don't know why they do it, but they're like, we have no interest in winning football games in November. So I think that's a fantastic job. I think Florida's right after them. And then I'd have to say Penn State. I think the Penn State job, you have to throw it in at this point because Penn State is another school. They've shown the propensity to win. They've shown that they're going to invest. They've shown every single thing. The only thing that Penn State does not have that the schools in front of them have is location, right? Where LSU, how close are you to New Orleans, right? Baton Rouge is still a lot to do in comparison.
What about Auburn? You didn't mention Auburn, or you have
Auburn
them
would be
after all
five.
those?
Auburn would be 5 for me. Auburn would be 5. And I think there's a gap between those top 4 and 5. I mean, let's be very realistic. You want to talk about nothing to do? Everything in Auburn, every single thing in Auburn is Auburn. That's it. That's all. Everything is on the main road, and the main road has tigers all over. Their Walmart got a tiger on it, for Christ's sake, Donno. It's too much tiger. Tony the Tiger would throw up seeing that much tiger in one area, okay? So I think that Auburn is a distant fit, but I would say that that's probably how we'll rank those jobs right now.
What about you, Zach?
I think conference supremacy really matters. It's the difference. Look, I'm not trying to make this as a direct comparison, but it is truly, you think about, okay, playing in the NFL versus the UFL versus the USFL kind of thing, right? And I'm not saying that the ACC is the equivalent, but development, who you're playing against on Saturdays routinely, and resources. Okay, so, Florida State and Virginia Tech, the surrounding areas might be a little bit better. LSU, I agree, is the top job opening, but again, it's really to each their own. If you find somebody that says, I don't mind State College, Pennsylvania, I could see myself anchoring down here for the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. Penn State, all of these schools are destination jobs to somebody. I know that if Deion Sanders got the call from Florida State, he would come back to his alma mater and anchor down there just so long as he gets the support, right? It's to each their own. That's why I think of, Mike Elko's a Texas A&M, but he's a Northeast guy, born and raised in New Jersey, graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. If we're actually looking at the dollars, the revenue, Penn State is a 10B school in terms of revenue based on what the Athletic did in terms of valuing the programs. Texas is far and away number 1. They 2.3 billion. It's something like that. But Penn State is at 1.2 billion. And then LSU is at 1.23 billion. So they have the resources. They have the revenue to compete with the people that are saying that, Penn State's barely a top 20 job. They struggle with NIL and things like that. It's just not the case. So Penn State is right there at LSU, Florida, and Penn State. I mean, you have an athletic director that is ready to go, ready to open up the war chest and give you whatever you need. He did that for James Franklin. And James Franklin couldn't succeed. He said, you want Jim Knowles as your defensive coordinator? We'll go get him. You want a player out of the transfer portal? We'll do what it takes to go get him. And somehow it was fumbled. It was mismanaged for whatever reason. And we might not know exactly what it is, a year or 2 years from now. All that being said is that though it's LSU, Florida, and Penn State in some sort of ranking, and then Florida State, Virginia. Let me include Auburn in there as well. Auburn, I would say I would put, if I had to actually rank them, I would say LSU. But then again, do you want politicians meddling in your job? Do you want a governor or a state politician who knows nothing about your program to come in and say, yeah, you're done. You don't have a job. I don't care if you're an LSU grad. I don't care if you're an LSU alum. I know better than you because I'm a politician that it doesn't have anything to do with your football program. So you could make the argument that leverages Penn State to the top, and then it's LSU because recruiting is going to be, everybody loves LSU in Louisiana. So,
yeah. Well, this has been good stuff as always. You guys want to make sure you follow all of us. It's great for us on Locked On ACC connecting with Zach from Locked On Nittany Lions. Follow him on X at Zach_Seyko. And, of course, check out Locked On Nittany Lions. Check Kenton and I out on Locked On ACC. Follow Kenton at TGIF_Kenton. He's also on Locked On Wolfpack. I also host Locked On Canes. Follow me at Alex Donno, and we'll see where the dominoes fall. This has been the craziest coaching carousel I can ever remember in college football. I've been watching this sport for a long time. So we'll talk to you again next time. Thank you for making this Locked On crossover your first listen right here on the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.